the National Endowment for the Humanities, bringing you the stories that define us.
Okay. If you can just present yourself, say your first and last name, when you were born, where you were born, and your parents' names.
Okay. My name is Michael Grijalva. I was born in
I'm so sorry. Sorry, give me a quick second.
Right.
I just thought you were a little bit crooked. No. What is happening? I have to be careful. Last time I accidentally loosened it up too much, and then
I hear you.
it gave me a heart attack. There we go. Now I tighten it too much. Okay, perfect. Sorry,
Good.
go right ahead.
No problem. My name is Michael Grijalva. I was born July the 11th, 1955 in Fabens, Texas. My father was Pilar Grijalva and my mother was Alicia Franco.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Do you remember who was the oldest family member within your family?
Let's see. It would have to be my grandmother's my grandmother's my grandmother's mother, my great grandmother on my father's side. She moved to San Elizario a very, very long time ago.
Okay. Do you remember if she had an occupation, or how do you remember her as a person?
From what my father told me, she came over here with my grandmother, who was a very at a very young age, and they came here, I guess, from Chihuahua somewhere, and she worked for Jesus Cobos, which is where the Grijalva family home was, which is just less than a mile from here.
Okay. And that being, you said your grandma on your dad's side.
Yes.
Which is Miss Katie's mother.
Yes, that would be yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Awesome. Okay. Do you know? You said they told you she was from Chihuahua, right?
Right. She came over here as a widow. She came over as a widow, and started working for Jesus Cobos, which was a large landowner. And she eventually, after the death, I guess, of his first wife, she eventually married him.
Okay. That's the one that's over there, right? The man that's over there on the exhibit, I believe.
Probably yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Probably yes. He was part of the South Wars.
Okay. How was then, if she was from the Govas, did she take up the last name, or did she remarried?
No. Grijalva came from my dad's father. Okay, and he married my grandmother, who was Cobos' stepdaughter.
Ah, okay.
And I believe my grandmother's last name was Aranda.
Okay. Sorry, I was like...
That's all right. It's got to make sense.
Yes. Okay. Do you remember any traditions through your family gatherings when you guys would get together? Or
I guess unfortunately, my earliest recollection of my grandmother and my grandfather, my dad's side. My grandfather passed away in 1960 or 61. My grandmother passed away in 63. Okay, and I don't remember my grandfather's wake. I was probably 6 years old, but I definitely remember my grandmother's, because at that time they were held in homes. Okay, that's where the Rosario was held, at the Velorio. It was in a home, and That's probably I remember my grandmother, but that was something that I truly remembered was the fact. Now, we got together quite a bit as a family. I remember all my uncles and aunts, bringing all their kids and coming there to my grandmother's house here in Sanelli, and yeah, that's probably what I recollect about my grandmother. Okay. Of course, my dad he wound up with the family farm here, and he farmed it for a long time. I made my first communion here, which, I went to summer school here. I didn't physically live here until the 70s, but we were always here, just kind of like where we are now. But yeah, it was. I remember all the get-togethers. I sure do.
Okay. Let me see real quick because I hear you, but I don't hear you.
Oh, okay.
If that makes sense.
A little bit.
Okay, good. We're good.
Good.
Alrighty. And that's actually, I was about to comment on that because you don't see wakes at homes anymore.
No, you don't. Absolutely not.
So
No,
that's
you
a
don't.
very
No, you
big
don't.
traditional thing.
Yeah, it's a very big traditional thing. Because one of my dad's brothers passed. Well, one of my dad's brothers passed away in the war, but that was way before my time. But one of my other dad's brothers, who I actually knew, Alfredo Freddy Grijalva, he got killed in a car accident on his way to visit my grandmother, who was in the hospital in El Paso. So he passed away in a car accident. I don't remember, that was very traumatic. I don't know. My grandmother's was too, but not as much as my uncle's, because it came very suddenly. He was only probably 21, 22 years old, just recently married, and I probably, my dad didn't even take us to that. I do remember his funeral. I do remember they did take us to the cemetery. There's another tradition here in Sanelli is that, we bury our own, and we still do. We did, the family gets together, we dig the hole, and we after the service is over, after the church does their service at the cemetery, then everybody takes a shovel and we bury our own. That's another tradition here in San Elizario. That's the way we did my father. We passed away in 1992.
Oh, wow. Okay. I did not know that, actually. Okay. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was that you didn't live here until the 70s, but you grew up
Oh, yes,
here.
we were always here.
Was there...
I made my first communion when I was, probably 9 years old. So, we were always here.
Yeah.
We were always here, okay? What happened is that we were living in New Mexico because my dad, just like the rest of his brothers, managed my grandfather's farms, and my grandfather had a farm in New Mexico. Okay, and even though we were all born here in Fabens, that's the closest hospital. My dad always used to say we would have been born in Sanelli if there was a place to be born here.
Right.
But yeah. So we were born in Fabens, and then we lived in New Mexico, in Mesilla and La Mesa, and when my grandfather died in '61. Then my dad was moved to take care of the farm in Tornillo, okay, and that's where I grew up basically, when it comes to living somewhere, okay. That's where I went to school. That's where I graduated from high school, but we were always here, okay. Otherwise, I would have made my first Holy Communion in Tornillo or Fabens at that time, because Tornillo didn't have a church, yeah, it was. We were always here, especially when we got working age, right? Because we were always here. My father used the same equipment at both farms in Tornillo and here, so it was a process of always being here, always being here. We were always here.
Did you have like a favorite when you guys were gathering together? Did you have like a favorite food or a specific I guess gathering that you recall? One of the things that Miss Katie was saying that well, it was a different time. But she was saying that when she was growing up, they would have picnics all the time. Did you ever
Yeah.
happen to have something like that?
Not that I recall. Easter was a big thing. Easter was a very very big thing because it was the end of the Lenten season, so that was a very big thing. I remember many Easter parties. Probably as far as a tradition goes, when it comes to that, it would be killing a pig. That's a very vivid memories of. At least once a year, sometimes even more. But for sure, in December, of killing a pig, and everybody just got together and made tamales and made we used to make carnita. We made all kinds of stuff. But yeah, killing a pig would be. That was one of the get-togethers. Yes.
I'm traumatized because I love pigs,
Uh-huh.
and I never met my grandfather on my mom's side, but my mom would tell me stories that he was a farmer and he had pigs.
Yes.
And I was like, maybe that's why I love pigs. And one Christmas, I remember one Christmas, my brother and my brother-in-law, they're best friends. They brought a pig, and their mistake was having it for a few days, and I fell in love with the pig.
Yes.
And the next day,
Yes.
he was killed, and I was like,
Yes.
never
that's-
again. I never
That's
again.
what happens to all farm animals, because
Yeah.
I remember killing, not only pigs for the get-togethers, but all kinds of animals,
Yeah.
and we would eat them,
Yeah. It was just after that I was like, never again.
I hear
Yes. Only dogs and cats are my pets now. Yeah. Was there an exciting event that you recall in San Elisario? Like I spoke to Mr. Sanchez, and he remembers like the Candelarias, or he remembers the big events that happened here in San Elisario.
The fiestas were a big thing. Okay, during that time we were holding them twice a year, and obviously the whole family was involved. I remember, at the start of the fiesta with the mariachis. I remember once we got of age that we'd have to wake up very early in the morning and come over here because my dad had us as part of the cleanup crew, and that's what we did before every time before the fiesta. That's what we did is we picked up the trash and took the trash, hauled the trash off, and everything else. But the fiestas was a very everybody looked forward to them. Everybody looked forward to them. I looked forward to the matachines and that type of thing. It was very.
You say you were very involved.
Yes. Oh yes. My father made sure of that. He was very involved in the church, and my mother in her own right was very involved in the church also. So yeah, it was. We were very involved in the fiesta. My mom used to make the gorditas and all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. At what moment did you ever have a frightening event that happened to you here in San Elisario?
What kind of event?
A frightening, something scary that happened to you? Any haunting, any ghosts?
The haunting type of not really. When we moved into when we moved in the 70s from Tornillo, early 70s from Tornillo into the house where my father and all his brothers and sisters were born. It's a very old house, probably I don't know 1880s, 1850s, maybe even older. I don't know.
Wow.
I really don't know. But that's where the family grew up. That's where all my aunts and uncles and my dad were born. Everybody said that there was hauntings and stuff because it was a very old house. But no, not really, not for me. No.
Because Miss Katie was telling me she lived
Yes.
in that house. There was
Yes.
this piano, and it went off, and people would say that it didn't, and I'm like, oh no.
I've heard the stories. My brothers, some of my brother and sisters tell stories because, when I graduated from high school, then I left El Paso. My mom wasn't even through having babies when I left the house. I'm the oldest,
Wow. Okay.
And my brothers and sisters lived at that house a lot longer than I did. And yes, they all have their stories to tell.
And you were like, no, it doesn't happen. Did coming back and forth to San Elizario, have you seen throughout the years any improvements that have happened here, or anything that you wish would happen in San Elizario?
Yeah, obviously, there's been a lot of improvements. Everybody, including myself, would have liked to have kept the old time atmosphere. Kind of like it was, before. Even before they built the old adobe horseshoe. But that's progress. Right now there are very, very few of us that can claim to be or originals. I mean, there's a lot of original families, but we're still represented very well here because my two brothers live here. And a lot of Grijalvas and Trujillos and all that, they all live here, and we're all descendants of Grijalva. And I still remember most of the original families, and like I said, very few of them still live here. I feel that we're still very, very well represented here when it comes to being from the, let's say, original families.
Right. Okay. Growing up, was there something that was passed down to you, to the family, that you cherish, or something that you wish you would have asked an old family member before they would pass away?
Yeah, well, yes. I don't know. My grandmother had a very old credenza. My dad's mom. Okay. It's a credenza, a China top. But at that time, they didn't have tops. It was just the bottom, and it's very, very old. And my dad wound up with it. Then when my dad passed away, of course, my mother wound up with it. When my mother passed away, to keep everything fair, we drew lots to see who would get what, because we all wanted the same things. But that's a very, very old family heirloom from here, from the Grijalvas. And I happened to have picked the lot, and I got it. And it is right now in my mom's home, in Clint, which is where my daughter lives now. So she'll probably, I know that she will. She'll wind up with it. Yeah, but it's a very, very old credenza. As a matter of fact, I got a call, or it was retold to me that my aunt, one of my dad's other sisters, would like to have it, because she married it, and although she lived in El Paso, none of them really got anything. But no, I told her that I already, I would hate.
You drew it.
Yes, I drew it, and
yes,
that was it.
It's fair.
Yes.
When you drive into San Elizario, is there a specific place that you stop to visit or to reminisce old times?
The cemetery. My father is buried there. My mother's not buried there. She's buried at Mount Carmel in El Paso, but my father's buried there. My father's father, my father and mother, and his brothers, most of his brothers are buried there.
Wow.
So yes, I go to the cemetery, I'm going to say quite a bit, but I go more often than most.
Yeah. Well, you're the oldest, so you have
oldest,
a
yes.
heavy burden
Yes.
there. Is there a famous family story that you think could be researched to find the truth, like a story that they passed down to you and you've always wondered if that was true or not?
Well, getting back to my great-grandmother, I think that's a fascinating story. Supposedly, she was married to a Spanish count of some kind. They used to call him a conde. I don't know what that means, but to me that means like maybe royalty, right?
Yeah.
But he was killed as part of the story is that they when they came from Spain, They flew. I mean, they ran from the revolutions in Spain, wound up in Chihuahua, and they found him, and they actually killed him, and that's what left my great grandmother and my grandmother, who was probably a baby. I don't know how old she was when she came here, but they had no choice but to leave, that area, which I understand was Chihuahua.
Right.
And of course, it's a straight shot right over here, and here's where she wound up. I would like to know more about that. Okay. There was a lot of Grijalvas. Now, coming back to Grijalvas, there was a lot of Grijalvas in San Elizario before my grandfather. Okay. When my grandfather came over, there was a lot. I mean, you can tell by the cemetery. Okay, I would be fascinated to know that somehow we were all, related. I mean, it's not a very common name now. It certainly was not a very common name back then. But yeah, that would be nice to know is, where my grandfather, and because his dad and my grandfather's dad and mom lived here. Okay. I'm not sure if they were already here or if my grandfather brought them over in the, I guess would it be the early 1900s? But my grandfather wound up here, and he eventually brought all his brothers and sisters over here also. Okay. But as far as Grijalvas that I know of from us, that's where it started. Okay, with my grandfather coming over here. But as evident by the cemetery and the church records and everything, I mean, Grijalvas go back, to the 1850s. And there's at the cemetery there's plots going back to the 1800s, and there's a lot of Grijalvas. A lot of Grijalvas.
That is true.
And in getting back to your answer to your question, yes, that's what I would like to know, that we have that my grandfather somehow were actual relatives of the original Grijalvas in San Elizario.
Yeah, and when I went to visit it shortly, there is a lot. I was like, wow, okay. Is there a question that you would want to ask a specific member before they have passed away?
That's an interesting question. There's a lot of them that I should have asked from the ones that have passed away, unfortunately. My father only had on my father's side, there's only two of my sisters, Katie being one of them, and my tia Rosa, and she lives in Albuquerque. She would be the other one. That's all that's left of my dad's siblings, right? So, gosh, I can't think of something I would ask them now, because the questions that I had have kind of been answered, for me already. The questions that I had for my dad, which I never asked, my uncles that passed away before my dad, which I never asked. But as far as now, I can't really think of one offhand. Maybe before the end of the interview, I'll think of something.
Okay. What do you hope to leave for the next generation that comes into your family?
For the next generation that comes into the family, and to a certain extent, like my kids, they already have it, is un orgullo of pride, being able to say that we're from San Elizario. That's something, and the church, which, didn't really happen with my kids, at least not yet. I still have hopes. But as far as for them to keep that alive, that they're from here, the Grijalvas have been here a very, very long time, so they can kind of follow the tradition. And when it comes to that, they're very, very proud. My daughter lives in Clint, but she she helps at the fiestas here, keeping the tradition, We used to go to church here as a family. We don't anymore, unfortunately. And my son comes in here, once a year for the fiesta of San Lorenzo. He lives in San Antonio. but he always walks from Sanelli because it's a tradition to walk to the Fiesta San Lorenzo. He always walks from Sanelli, him and his family walk from Sanelli. So yeah, they're very proud. My son is kind of like an artist, not professionally, but he draws some very beautiful pictures of the church. He has some of the church. Every time that I find a portrait of a church done well, then I tell him about it, and he's interested in that type of thing. So yeah, he's very interested in San LA.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, my son married a girl here from Sonelli, and they didn't even know that they we lived in Plano at that time, Plano, Texas, and he was in the 7th grade, and they had a show and tell, and all of a sudden, they find out, and this other little girl, they find out that they actually were from the same town.
Wow.
From the same town. So yeah, I think that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
We held a big family reunion, Grijalva family reunion, about that time. When we lived in Plano, okay, and we went. It was a big family, Grijalva family. We were there at the family reunion, and we're all wearing different T-shirts, according to the families that you came from. And my son says, "Dad," she says, I know that guy over there, another little kid." I said, "What do you mean you know him?" He says, "I know him. He goes to school with me." I said, "Well, let's go see who it is." And sure enough, it was one of the distant cousins, and they were in the same school, and they didn't know about it. They didn't know about it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if anything, it would be getting back to your question. It would be a very deep and understanding of where you come from, which is here, and how proud you are that you were here.
And that's very interesting because that's what I was telling Lillian, that I interviewed Mr. Barra, and he was like, I was doing research and it turns out I have a Trujillo in one of my lines, and it's like, we're all related somehow.
Yes,
and I was
yes.
like, that's so...
And that's always been the story here in Sanelli, is that we're all, believe me, we're all remarried, we're all related somehow. My sister married an Alarcón, who was originally from Clint, but originally from here, and my cousins were his cousins, okay, on the Larcón side, all right. So they weren't really cousins or anything, right? But I mean, that's what I mean when I say that everybody here is somehow related.
Yeah.
It's very common. It's it's very common.
And you never know. Maybe they might, but in a
right.
very far up in the tree line.
Yes. Yeah, all you need to do is to walk La Placita and see all the benches and with the namesakes on them. And I mean, it's Grijalvas, Trujillos, Parras. It's just
yes, cousins.
Loyas.
Yeah.
Yes.
What was another question? I have it right here.
Okay.
If you were to write a book about your memories of San Elizario, what do you think what would you title it?
What would I title it?
I know it's a very
the town that kept the old time memories for a long time. The town that kept being a small town. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. As long as it could. Something along those lines. El Paso. San Elizario was the first county seat of El Paso. And all of us from here we're kind of the same when it comes to that thinking. Is that the reason that it moved out is because we didn't. At that time, of course, wasn't me, but the people just didn't want this town to turn into a city. And they knew it was coming. They liked the farms. They liked the that type of thing, and that's passed down through generations. So that would be the title of my book, something to the effect that You know, the town that kept that kept the old time atmosphere for as long as it could.
Yeah, and I think it has. It really has.
A little bit, yes, it
Yeah,
has.
because every time I live in Socorro,
Uh-huh.
and even though I grew up in Socorro, I don't really. That's because my parents weren't from Socorro, you know, and I can't imagine if my parents were actually from Socorro, I might have a little bit more attachment. I might be digging a little bit more as to my ancestry
Yes.
and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And Socorro itself is already growing, but San Elisario, you see how it's not growing, but it hasn't lost like its beauty of it.
Right.
It still continues to be,
Right.
cultivating its history,
Yes,
continuing.
correct.
So I think it's
Correct.
a very good title. Um, when you moved away, because you moved away to play in Texas, what were the circumstances that made you move away, and what were the circumstances that made you come back?
When of course when I left here, uh, I went to school in Arizona in the 70s. Okay, and I came back to live here, uh, and then I got married, and I lived at my father's old house with my wife and soon to be 2 kids. Um, and I had a job. I was going to UTEP at that time, and I had a job working at a furniture store in El Paso. And I found out very, very early in age that if you wanted to make any money, you had to get the heck out of here.
Mm.
Okay, and although we didn't live in poverty, farmers, they weren't rich. Not I mean, it just didn't happen. My father wasn't a very, very big farmer, but so I took my first move to Houston, and that's why I moved. I worked for Levitt's Furniture for 26 years. During that time, I moved 8 times.
Wow.
I managed every Texas city every Texas city that had a store in, and I came back after my Houston thing and was very fortunate to stay here for a long time. But you had to move if you wanted to keep on making the money. You couldn't stay here and make the kind of money that I had aspirations of making at that time. So I came back because my relatives were starting to get older. Some had passed away. I was living in San Antonio at the time. In fact, my ex-wife still lives in San Antonio, and my kids all, but I came back because, I was afraid that my mother would pass away, and I wouldn't spend the last years that she had with her.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fortunate that when my dad passed away, I was living here. But that's why I came back, because my relatives were and it probably cost me my marriage to a certain extent, because I she was tired of moving. After 8 times, I don't blame her. But fortunately, my daughter did come. She lives at my mom's house in Clint. She rents my mom's house. She's going to school, and she had the same feeling. She moved back over here. But that's the reason that I came back, is because everybody was getting older, everybody was passing away, and my mother especially. Yes.
Okay. The last question that I have for you is there any way that the World War II affected your family at some point? Did you hear any stories about it?
Yes, my father, and I can just it's hard to imagine that kind of trauma when I don't know how old my dad was, but my uncle was killed in the war in 1944, I believe. He had been there for a year, and like I said, my other uncle's death, which I remember was very traumatic. That was an accident, but looking at that, you know, taking the boys, you know, to war, and some of them came back and some of them didn't. I mean, yeah, that must have been very, very traumatic for the for the family. Although it didn't affect me directly, I can just imagine how it affected, you know, my grandmother, my dad's sibling, because he was one of Antonio was one of the older ones.
Mm-hmm.
I can just imagine how it affected the siblings. Probably some hadn't even been born. I don't know for a fact, but probably some hadn't even been born yet when he was killed at the war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Miss Ponce was telling me that her mom never recovered, and that her dad and just said no, like, he's not dead. He can't be dead. And if there's no body, he can't be dead.
Right.
And that they never wanted. They had the option apparently to like bring his body back, but that he was like they might bring somebody else's body. So it's yeah, I can just imagine. But is there anything else that you wanted to add before we finish this interview?
No, I welcome the opportunity. I really do. I mean, it's like, you know, I can't believe it. But no, other than that, no, I thank you. I welcome the opportunity to be able to be, you know, part of this.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Awesome. Okay. Let me just stop it right